It's 2023 and I'm in my MMA gym. I've been going for a few months now and we're doing a HIIT session, a high intensity interval training session. So it's basically just where you do loads of reps until you really can't anymore. And then you go into the next one, you have like a minute rest, you go into the next one. So by this point I had been weightlifting at least on and off for like 5 years. So I thought I was in pretty good health. I don't eat too badly, but at this point I wasn't eating optimally. I wasn't eating like I am now, which is a little bit better. But in this class, there's killers, there is professional fighters, there are people who've been doing it for years, and there's new people, and there's older people, older men, older women, and there's people who have literally just gone from the junior sessions that were just running before. So I'm in this class, and it's really a wake-up call. And I'm saying this because I am absolutely out of my depth. I'm completely out of my depth. So my arms and my legs start to just feel like metal or like lead. They're so weighted. Just trying to move them around is such a difficulty. And I'm seeing white spots in my vision. And it was a wake-up call because I realized that I wasn't as healthy as I thought I was. I wasn't as able as I thought I was. And I wasn't as able to do things that I thought I might have been able to do from weightlifting. So fast forward 9 months and I have been now running for 5 hours. I think it's like 4 hours and 58 minutes in particular, and I had just finished the Brighton Marathon, as you can see. So now that I've done that, I can do a combination of all three, and for me personally it's been the best thing that I've done recently in terms of exercise plans and stuff like that. So I do MMA, I do cardio and stretching, and I also do weightlifting, as I always do. Although weightlifting for me is just not new, it's just something that I do. I'm sure it would be the same for a few people who are watching this as well. This is the most optimal way, not just for health now, but for health in the future. And I know what you're going to say, but cardio kills gains, bro. This is the kind of thing that people often talk about. But this is not the case. So I, at the moment, am the heaviest that I've ever been, and it's not like it's fat, as you can see in the photo there. Like, it's pretty much muscle to an extent. I'm not going to say it's all muscle. There is a little bit of fat, but like, it's fine. It's only marginal. I'd be silly if I was going to look at that and think, that I need to get rid of it or anything like that. As you can see here, I'm pretty much the heaviest that I've ever been. And if you see that drop off there when it was 70 kilograms, that is around the marathon. That's when I was doing that. So naturally, you're going to lose a lot of weight when you're doing so much cardio. But I also wasn't working out, and I also wasn't eating as much as I should have. So now it's way up because I'm eating as I should, which is a lot more. And I'm doing all of these different activities as well. So I think it's awesome that people like you want to watch videos like these. I'm sure you'll take some good information out of it, whether you are an athlete or whether you are someone who is just trying to get off the couch. This is intended to take you from someone who has lots of physical stresses to someone who can do whatever they want physically, to someone who isn't really educated and doesn't really pay too much attention to what they eat, to someone who actually knows exactly what's good for them, and in general, someone who is unhealthy to someone who is healthy. You're in the Amazon rainforest. You and your brother return home from a bountiful feast. You've hunted a wild pig. You're taking it back to your tribe to cook it over an open fire. All is well until the next morning you come down with a serious illness. So what do? You go to the shaman, of course. He tells you this illness is caused by an evil spirit within you, and he hands you a bunch of aromatic herbs with his left hand and some steaming hot beige liquid in his right. This will return you to full health, he says. This is medicine 1.0. You're in the doctor's office. Your doctor has been monitoring you for type 2 diabetes for quite a while now. It's your third session with him, and despite you experiencing some of its symptoms, he continues to insist and reassure you, no, you're in the average range, you're not diabetic. You shrug your arms, and what do? You eat the ice cream out of the freezer because you're not diabetic, and you've done this before so many times. You eat the usual sugary cereal in the morning, processed food for lunch, and a takeaway for dinner. What your doctor didn't tell you is that you were 1 milligram per deciliter away from being pre-diabetic. You were right on the precipice. And when he does tell you, He'll give you some drugs and some pills that he'll tell you will help you, but at that point you might be too far gone already. And at the end of the day, you don't want to be on drugs and you don't want to be on medicines. You would much rather just be healthy naturally. I'm sure you can agree with that. This is Medicine 2.0. We have made leaps and bounds in medicine to help you after an accident, or to help you if you become insulin resistant, or after a heart attack or something like that. Modern medicine is genuinely incredible, like 100%. But it's incredible at helping you live longer. It is not good at helping you live healthier. When I say this, I'm talking about health span versus lifespan. Health span is how long you can live in good health, to live without pain, disability, and disease. Life expectancy has increased by 3 decades since the mid-20th century. Parallel health span expansions has, however, not followed. This video is to help you do something about that. Medicine 3.0 is the practice of taking action now to extend one's health span. It is looking at the 4 pillars of longevity: exercise, nutrition, sleep, and mental health. Improving these aspects of our lives in the present will help push back against diseases that we might experience towards the end of our lives that are some of the most brutal ones, and the majority of them can be pushed back a lot further or just completely avoided. If you're somebody who's interested in this stuff, and if you're somebody who's made the bold decision to improve your health, if you're someone who isn't healthy at the minute, I honestly want to congratulate you, because it's not an easy decision to admit that something is wrong and then to do something about it. It's a lot easier to just say, oh, something's wrong with me, it's everyone else's fault, or there's nothing I can do. So honestly, well done to being self-aware and wanting to make a change in your life. I want you to think about why you want to live longer. Is it because you want to be the dad that wins the sports day, or is it because you want to be the mother who can go out with their child into a forest and find something, or a man that wants to play around, or even a granddad who still wants to play around with their grandchildren? And are you willing to put in the work to secure that future for yourself? If you are, then the rest of this guide will be specifically on how you can live longer, but more importantly, how you can live better for longer, not just increasing your lifespan, but also increasing your health span. Heart disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disorders, and metabolic dysfunction are the causes of 80% of deaths of people over the age of 50 and don't smoke. These are the 4 chronic diseases that we need to take action against. Number 1, heart disease is the most common and dangerous horseman of the 4. Heart and circulatory diseases cause around a quarter of all deaths in the UK. That's more than 170,000 deaths a year, or 480 each day. 1 every 3 minutes. That's 2 or more since you started this video. What is cholesterol? It's a fat-like substance that floats around in your veins, providing vital functions such as a precursor to hormones such as estrogen and testosterone, and other sex hormones, as well as adrenal gland hormones, which help with the most vital of functions such as digesting, regulating sugar, blood sugar, stuff like that. So why does cholesterol have such a bad reputation? Before we start, there isn't any strong links between dietary cholesterol and the actual cholesterol that run through your veins, so don't worry about that. But you've heard of bad and good cholesterol. Bad cholesterol being LDL cholesterol and good cholesterol being HDL cholesterol. Now, what's the difference between the two? The difference is the good cholesterol, the HDL cholesterol, has the ability to bounce off your arterial walls. So in the veins, these things flow through them, and HDL can bounce off the walls. So that, imagine there's a vein here, HDL can just go bam, 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 like that. Whereas LDL cholesterol is formed in a way which makes it more sticky. So it can go like, it can bounce once or twice, bam, and then it might get stuck here. Then another one goes here and it gets stuck as well. This is what leads to high blood pressure, you see, because what happens is the LDL cholesterol takes up more and more space in your veins and becomes more plaquified. It becomes more hard, that the blood, in order to get through the veins, which have now squeezed almost shut, they have to pump the blood more and more and more, which leads to high blood pressure, which you don't want, because these things contribute to strokes and heart attacks and heart diseases and all sorts of bad crap. You don't want to be having that. Now, how do I increase my HDL levels and lower my LDL levels? Number one is exercise. Now, I'm actually not going to get too much into exercise at the minute. That will be later on in the video because we have a whole section on it because it's just that important. Number two is replace your intake of saturated fats with monounsaturated or polyunsaturated fats. Now, I know this sounds quite intense and it can sound quite complicated, but I promise you it's actually not that bad. So things like these, and often things that are really overprocessed, have these saturated fats in them. There's a debate going on that it's actually just the long chain saturated fats that are bad for us, so I've taken that on board as well. But a lot of these are really bad for long chain saturated fats and in general just really low quality fats and just really crap food for you. So you're going to be looking for things such as margarine butter is terrible for you, milk chocolate, although I know it's a treat, but if you're having it too much, it's going to be really bad for you as well. Coconut oil, like low quality coconut oil, I'm not talking MCT oil, also really bad for you in terms of saturated fats. As well as, unfortunately, red meat is shown to have a lot of these saturated fats. I will personally still have red meat just because I think it's healthy for me as a human, but I'm obviously going to be regulating it. I won't have like a ribeye steak every single day. I'll have it twice a week, which is still quite a lot. But if you're someone who is really worried about heart disease, maybe it runs in your family or something, maybe reducing the amount of fatty red meat cuts that you eat could be really beneficial. So, and that also includes the chicken skin over here. You can cook chicken and take the chicken skin off if you want. I'm not going to do that. And you replace it with these. So, make sure you're getting your vegetables in because they're really good for nutritious profiles and they also genuinely have a small amount of saturated fats. That's probably why they don't taste very good for a lot of people. And for example, salmon has a lot of polyunsaturated fats. Eggs have a lot of monounsaturated fats. It is believed that good quality grass-fed butter actually has less saturated fats and more nutritional value as well. So that could be always an option for you as well. But for example, chicken breast as well has a very low amount of saturated fats. And my other suggestion is, obviously we were talking about previously, like the vegetable oils and some of these butters some people used to cook with, whereas another really good option would be olive oil that is refined, so it has a higher smoke point. You could do it with extra virgin, but that's not going to be good because the smoke point is so low it will burn, and that's proven to be cancerous. So, and then the other one is the oil that I use personally. Some people don't like it because some people can feel like they can taste it, but organic avocado oil for frying is really good. It has such a high smoke point, and for me personally, I don't taste anything different. But one thing that isn't on a person-to-person basis is sugar and processed foods. So sugar and processed foods actively reduce your HDL level. That's just how it is. They actively reduce it. Try and cut that out as much as you can. With red meats as well, I'll go back to it, like you can still have some of it even though it's been proven to have high amounts of saturated fats, whether it be short, medium or long. I think it's mainly short and medium, but if it does have long, then fair enough. Either or, it's up to you. It's up to you on your goals. For example, I want to put weight on. Red meat's really good for that. Red meat's really good for putting on muscle. But the last thing that I want to say on this topic is do not choose a diet that is going to make you pull your hair out. If you're generally having a KFC every single day, it's going to be way too difficult for you to go into an organic food shop and then know exactly what to buy, know exactly what to do with it, and know exactly when to have it and how long it will last. There's too many things to think about. So what I will say is if you're having a KFC every day, try and have a KFC every other day to start out with. That's going to be double as good. It's good to start a diet that you genuinely believe that you can stick to. It's not good to just go all out. I know people always say to lock in, but it doesn't always work out like that. Anyway, cancer. Of the four, we pretty much know the least about cancer, which makes it even scarier because it's the second most deadly. Dr. Attia can't and doesn't mention any alternative ways of remedying cancer than we already know. His recommendations only differ from the norm in the way of how much his recommendations only slightly differ from the norm in the way that he emphasizes his two rules. These two rules are Rule 1, don't get cancer, And rule 2, detect it early. Obviously, rule 1 sounds like it's a bit like silly. So as we mentioned before, actually, LDL cholesterol, high levels of insulin in the blood, and smoking are all believed to cause cancer. So reducing these as much as possible are the best preventative measures, in addition to making sure you're exercising and eating well, or eating as well as you could do. To detect it quickly, obviously go to the doctor if you feel any lumps. If you're a male, if you feel any lumps in your testicles, and if you're female, if you feel any lumps in your breasts, obviously go to a doctor ASAP if you feel that. Also make sure that you are feeling as well, to make sure that there isn't any lumps there. Although apart from this, in Medicine 2.0 at the very least, in my country, we don't really have the best way of finding it. There's many different places in the world, and there's many different doctors who are starting to trust different kinds of methods of being able to find cancer, such as putting their faith in certain types of blood work. But I know for my country that isn't currently available. But for your country, that might be available. That's up to you. You should find that out. Metabolic issues. When I mention someone who has metabolic issues, who do you think of? Be honest. You might think of someone who is very overweight. Someone with a terrible, awful diet. The truth is, a third of the people who have metabolic issues are considered to have a normal body type. Now, to me and you, we might hear this and understand that a normal body type now might be overweight for someone who lived 30 years ago. But it's something to still look at for sure. You can still have issues even if you're not the fattest in the room. People come in all different shapes and sizes. Some people are able to store more visceral fat than other people. Some people are easy to put on subcutaneous fat than other people. So, for example, you have people who genuinely look completely healthy, but they might be something like diabetic, and they might have fatty liver disease. Even though they look so healthy, they just have more space in their body to store more fat. Visceral fat, in particular, cannot be seen from the outside, as opposed to subcutaneous fat that you can quite clearly see. Visceral fat is stored in your organs and in the spaces between them. Oftentimes, visceral fat can pool around your heart, can pool around your liver and your kidneys and stuff, and that can cause really bad issues, especially because those vital organs are, well, so vital. Visceral fat also typically targets the liver. The liver is so important because it has so many crucial things that it does for your body. For example, it supports metabolism, immunity, digestion, detoxification, and it also stores all your vitamins. But one of the most vital things that it does is it regulates your blood sugar. And if your liver basically stops working or starts acting up, you will become insulin resistant. And that is basically diabetes. So how do we avoid this? We reduce the amount of sugar that we intake. Now, I know some people will say some sugars are better than other sugars, and I understand that. Just try to reduce it as much as you can. There's really no two ways about it. The one thing about sugar in particular is, for whatever reason, your body is able to digest it a little bit better than it can with fructose. Now, this is the thing about juices, you see. On all of the packets, they'll say that there's extra vitamins and there's extra minerals and it's one of your 5 a day. But what they don't say is that it is full to the brim with fructose sugars. Whether or not they are added or whether or not they are not added, fructose, as opposed to glucose, is not well digested in your body at all. Your body actually finds it really difficult to digest it. So if it has a lot of it, your stomach, while struggling to digest it, will push it onto your liver. This will cause you to get fatty liver disease, and we don't want that. As we were just talking about, this is what we don't want. Exercise. Exercise specifically helps slow down the development of intermuscular fibers that can suck fat into the muscles, meaning without this, your muscles can become insulin conductive for longer, taking you further away from insulin resistance as you get older. And properly reducing stress and balancing your sex hormones, as they contribute to the holding of fat in the body. For example, cortisol, the stress hormone, hates subcutaneous fats but loves visceral fat. While neither are good, it would be good for you to keep this under your control, whether it be through finding a relaxing routine for yourself, through meditating or stretching, or even through using certain supplements. Either or, it's a good thing to look out for. Alzheimer's. All of the horsemen are brutal, but this one, in my opinion, is the most cruel of them all. Alzheimer's is a rapid and never-ending decrease in cognitive ability, to the point when you can't remember your loved ones, to the point when you can't remember who you are, and then eventually to the point where you can't remember bodily functions that are needed to survive, such as remembering how to breathe. This one is slightly different to the others, as I'm sure you can imagine, because not only is it a physical decline, but also a mental decline. And with that, sometimes the physical decline of the brain can cause the mental decline, and sometimes the mental decline can cause the physical decline. So both need to be considered. Dr. Attia mentions in this chapter that some doctors believe that if you have a certain gene, that you will have Alzheimer's no matter what, and it's a foregone conclusion, even to the point when they don't tell some of their patients. Now, for me personally, I honestly think this is really stupid. I actually think it's hurtful, and I think it's kind of pathetic, to be honest, because while we don't know too much about Alzheimer's, we do know that there's certain ways of being able to push the disease back further and further in your lifespan. So why not let that person know so they can start doing those things now? That's just my philosophy on it. As I said before, we don't know exactly where Alzheimer's comes from, but we do have a few suspects that we can look at. Number one is something called amyloid beta. Now what this is a kind of waxy, furry kind of substance that can encase around your neurotransmitters. While this is believed to potentially be a cause of Alzheimer's, it's not always found in cadavers of people who have Alzheimer's, so it's not a 100% this is definitely it, you need to get rid of this kind of thing. What most professionals will say, and what Dr. Attia suggests here as well, is although this might not be proven to be something that will definitely cause Alzheimer's, it's still something that we should look to get rid of, which is something that we'll touch on later on in the guide. Another thing that Dr. Attia mentions is that just like the amyloid beta, another thing that could be causing it is lack of blood flow to the brain. So as we were talking about Alzheimer cadavers, this has a 15 to 20% rate of people who had Alzheimer's and died from Alzheimer's having this. So while obviously it's still not the majority, as I said, we don't know exactly what causes it, this is something that is really promising in terms of us being able to tie down exactly what it is. So with those things in mind, these are the things that help with Alzheimer's. Number one is a proper sleep. Proper sleep helps rejuvenate the body. It helps reset the brain, and it helps clear the brain of fluids and helps clear the body of waste, which I'll touch on more in the sleep portion of this video. But long story short, that amyloid beta that we were talking about earlier that would be good to get rid of, what it does is when you go to sleep, it kind of rushes all of the fluid out of your body and it clears away those amyloid beta as well from your neurotransmitters. The second one that Dr. Attia mentions is weightlifting. Now, what Dr. Attia mentions in this chapter is something that I don't 100% agree with, but this is what he says. He mentions that the people who have a stronger grip strength are actually less likely to have Alzheimer's than other people. Now, what I take from this is I just don't believe that there's enough evidence to have a causal link between how much you can squeeze your hand and how well your cognitive ability can withstand life. But I do understand that it's probably a proxy for just how healthy you are and how much muscle you have. We also have to remember that lack of blood to the brain can also be a problem as well. So what I'm trying to say with this is what Dr. Attia mentions in specific is the grip strength. And while I don't think that you just training your forearms will make your brain any better, I do think that if we use the grip strength as a proxy of just being strong and just having muscles and just having good blood flow, then we can look at exercise being a deterrent to Alzheimer's. So C is cognitive tasks. Now, when I talk about cognitive tasks, I mean stuff like socializing, running outside, boxing to an extent, only pad work really, are all really great cognitive tasks in order to keep your brain functioning. Now, Dr. Attia actually mentions in specific crossword puzzles. Now, a lot of people believe that crossword puzzles is good for your brain, and while I'm sure it is to an extent, it only portrays one issue for you to solve. That issue is which word goes here, and which word goes here, and which word goes here, right? So obviously, it's quite a linear way of looking at it. If you do these three things on the screen, they will present cognitive tasks and cognitive problems that you will have to use actually your brain in a creative way in order to solve. But what I will say, especially for these two here on the side, is, for example, if you're socializing, a lot of the time people put socializing in with drinking alcohol, for example. For some people, they just come hand in hand. And obviously, if you're going to be socializing and drinking alcohol, you're going to actually be making your cognitive ability worse. You'll be putting one good habit with one bad habit that is a lot worse than that good habit is for cognitive ability. And also that's the same for boxing as well. It's not actually boxing in specific I'm talking about pad work. So it's just like someone's going to be holding their hands up like this. I'm going to say, jab, jab, right hand, whatever. So you have to think about that, and you have to cognitively think, okay, left, right, like that. But if someone's hitting you in the head, if you're sparring, if you're having a fight, and someone's hitting you in the head, but we know that's really bad. We see so many fighters get CTE. That's bad. So you have to do these things in the right way. But most of the time, it's just common sense, Just think about it. Think about your own lifestyle. Think about what's good for you. I think if you're watching an actual full guide on health, you must be someone who has more than 2 brain cells to rub together. So when I'm saying this, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise for you. But I have to say this nonetheless. These solutions I'm about to present to you are very powerful and proven to be effective. But these methods are not a one-size-fits-all. Use these methods with your own understanding of your own life and your own lifestyle, with the understanding of your own body, and try to fit it into your own schedule. In the following chapters, I will be telling you the exact actions Dr. Attia mentions you should do to better your health and increase your health span. Exercise. The best exercise for longevity is none of them. There is no one best exercise for health span, but instead it is best to be an all-rounder, to be competent, if not skilled, at multiple different bases in multiple different sports. A runner's knees are likely to give out. A cyclist is likely to have lower back and neck pain. A weightlifter can have some seriously bad injuries and can often have an inflexible body. Therefore, if we're talking about longevity, using multiple sports in tandem with one another is a lot better to not get injuries and to fortify the body in multiple different ways. So what muscular improvements are we hoping for? An increase in bone density, slowing the steep decline of muscle mass after the age of 70 or so, improved flexibility and resilience to falls, and even cognitive health, as we mentioned before. Now, what benefits are we looking for from cardio? Increased blood flow to muscles, increased efficiency of muscles, overall health and enjoyment of life, and healthy blood flow to the brain as well, as we mentioned before in the Alzheimer's section. Without any more, let's go straight into the exercises you should be doing for training. Zone 2 cardio. Zone 2 cardio is not going past the point when you can't have a conversation with someone while doing the exercise, but you're still working, just not super hard. This is obviously on a person-to-person basis, but for an example, quickly walking on an inclined treadmill or going on a resisted bicycle, not to the point when you're gasping for breath, but you're beginning to sweat. You're feeling the burn a little, but you can maintain the level for more than 45 minutes to an hour. Zone 2 cardio has 3 main benefits. So the number 1 benefit is it gives you more powerful mitochondria. Now, mitochondria will help protect the cells and makes your muscles more efficient, makes your whole body more efficient, makes your blood more efficient. So it's a really important thing to get right. And number 2 is it helps decrease blood sugar levels. So if you're someone who is overnourished, perhaps overweight, it'll be really good for burning the sugar in your blood if you have high blood sugar. The third benefit is for those people who are already fit, doing zone 2 cardio actually opens up new glucose pathways, which means that essentially the muscles are rushing glucose into the muscles, which essentially bypasses insulin resistance and lowering blood sugar levels organically. Dr. Attia mentions in specific to do 3 hours of this a week, and it doesn't have to be 3 hours all at once. It could be 1 hour and 1 hour and 1 hour, or it could be how I've done here, which is 45 minutes, 45 minutes, 45 minutes, 45 minutes on different days. VO2 max. VO2 max means maximum oxygen consumption, how hard you can go before you're completely finished, before you can't go any longer. Zone 2 is you can have a conversation. This is zone 5 when you should be struggling to say a word or two out loud. Dr. Attia portrays the importance of this metric by telling us that if a 70-year-old has the VO2 max of a 60-year-old, bar obvious variables, there is no reason to suggest that the 70-year-old doesn't have the ability to live like a 60-year-old, someone who is a decade younger than them. While this is quite a general statement, it does illustrate how important it is for longevity. So it is suggested to do 4 minutes of zone 5 and then 4 minutes of a more resting pace, and to do that for 4 to 6 cycles. So that would be really quick and then still on the exercise, but just really, really slow, just resting and then doing it again, resting, doing it again, resting, doing it again, resting. That would be doing it for 4 cycles or 6 cycles, but obviously take it at your own pace. If you honestly need to start with 3 cycles, then I think that's fair enough. Strength training. The best time to start building muscle is right now. As you get older, specifically as you age from 30 years onwards, it gets harder and harder to put muscle on, which is a problem when you consider the drastic decline of muscle that you're likely to see when you reach 60 or above. It could be earlier for menopausal women as well. Dr. Attia's philosophy in the book is to build as much muscle as you feel comfortable with at the moment to help offset that decline that you'll experience later on in life. You will still have muscle even when it's declining when you get older and older. Why is muscle so important? Muscle helps maintain and strengthen your bone mass density, which is important to keep up with to avoid accidents when in your older years. Grip strength, everyday tasks including carrying bags, moving things around, and holding things are dependent on our grip strength. A strong grip strength has been shown to decrease all-cause mortality, which includes the Four Horsemen. In addition to this, obviously, as I mentioned before, a lot of people say that if you have better grip strength, then you'll be less likely to have Alzheimer's. This is good for that as well. The exercises that Dr. Attia specifically talks about is hip hinge exercises and things that will improve your posterior chain. As you can see here, it's the muscles around your spine and the muscles that support your spine. So what we're going to be looking for is hip thrusts, such as this, to help fortify your hips as you get older, and more functional exercises for more functional strength, such as kettlebell sweeps or whatever you call them, and stuff like that, as well as RDLs, which is another form of hip hinge exercises. In addition to that, he mentions body weight exercises as well as grip strength exercises, as well as traditional weightlifting, pulling exercises. This one's best just for having a general ability of strength that when you get older. This one's best for more practical kind of things that you will have to do every day in your life, such as carrying things, and pulling exercises, specifically on the eccentric, good for the joints, will be really good as you get older. Pulling exercises are really good for just general life. Pushing exercises too, but Dr. Attia puts a bit more emphasis on pulling exercises in particular. Stability. Core strength, flexibility, and breathing deeply are all tactics that Attia explores and deploys to help his own stability. Stability is a huge part of Dr. Attia's health regime. He mentions it as a building block for physical health, as it will greatly help in the shifting of weight onto different joints and different tendons, which can often be an issue as we get older. He makes the point of how, as humans, certain movements are primal to us. Certain movements are natural for us to do, but due to our sedentary lifestyles, our bodies have unlearned many different aspects of movement. For example, he mentions his kid is able to, without even thinking about it, perform a deep squat where their bottom almost touches the floor, while they have both feet and toes on the floor as well, as you can see here, and as you can see this more, I don't know what I would call this guy, old folk guy. This is something our bodies have unlearnt because, well, use it or lose it. Dr. Attia promotes for us to relearn these flexible movements to take care of not just our abdominals, but also to stretch, do yoga and flexibility training, but to also breathe deeply into our pelvis floor as to straighten out our back, specifically for people like me who have an arch which kind of sticks out my bottom a little bit. And he also mentions doing different practices to help neuromuscular capacity of the back, improving posture and muscular capacity. He suggests doing an almost meditative yoga exercise when you lay on all fours and use your mind to kind of initiate each muscle of the back, to kind of say, okay, the top one now, the middle one, the bottom. He suggests doing that. In summary, so we're going to want to look for 2.5 to 3 hours of zone 2 cardio, VO2 max training, 4 minutes off, 4 minutes on, 6 to 8 reps once a week. At least 2 to 3 workout sessions of traditional weightlifting, which can include the grip strength and the hip hinging exercises, and stretching and balance workouts that you can do almost every day, if not every other day. Step 5, and this is a big one by the way. nutrition. As we mentioned earlier, I'm not going to tell you the best diet for you, but I will instead lay out the pros and cons of different dietary options, and it's up to you to see if it fits your goals and your lifestyle. First, let's talk about caloric restriction. Scientists did a study on two groups of monkeys. One of them was fed as much as they'd like, and the other was fed 25% below their needed amount. The conclusion to this study was that the monkeys that actually ate less were significantly less likely. And then there's another study. Two groups of monkeys. One group can eat as much as they want, and the other group has to eat 25% below their needed amount. You would think it would be the same result as always. You would think it would be the same result as the last experiment, but that actually wasn't the case with this one. In the second study, the calorically restricted group actually didn't live any longer than the group that could eat whatever they wanted. This confused the world of science for a little while, until the word started to spread that in the first experiment, the monkeys that had the restricted caloric diet were actually eating foods that were unprocessed, foods that were fresh, and foods that didn't have more than 5% of the caloric intake coming from sugars. Whereas both sets of the monkeys in the second experiment were having really sugary, highly processed foods that were spiking their insulin, no doubt. So what we have to think about as well is you might have a calorically restricted diet, but it might be equally as important to have a good diet, to have an unprocessed diet, to have a low sugar diet all the same. Dr. Attia mentions that for people who are overweight, having a calorically restricted diet is obviously a really good idea. If you're already overnourished, taking a stance like this might be more helpful for reducing that subcutaneous fat, reducing visceral fat even. But he also emphasizes that for people who are already healthy, it is actually really good to look at the quality of your diet itself, to try and get those unprocessed foods, to try and get single ingredient foods, to try not to snack and eat junk food, and to eat really good food for you. Although one thing that I will stress, like I did earlier, is if you're someone who's used to having all of these bad foods, it honestly might not be the best way for you to move forward by just completely getting rid of all of them, because it's more likely than not that you're going to just go back straight into it if you just go too far. So what I'll end this section on is to say to you that no matter what, one Big Mac is better than 3 Big Macs, if that's the issue. I'm sure you know that person who doesn't eat carbohydrates and praises its benefits like it's the best thing since sliced bread. And I'm sure you know someone who eats as much protein as possible just for the gains, bro, for the gains. Caloric restriction is restricting just how much calories you get, whereas dietary restriction is reducing how much of a certain nutrient you get. Let's start with carbohydrates. Carbs come hand in hand with sugars. You really cannot have one without the other. And we know sugar is bad for us, as we've previously discussed. But Dr. Attia mentions that eating more complex carbs, such as bananas and brown rice and sweet potatoes, are more likely to have a lower amount of sugar and to insulin spike us less, and is also more likely to have more nutritional value. Typically for people who are diabetic or pre-diabetic, the keto diet can help them lower their blood sugar. As the keto diet itself is just getting rid of all carbs altogether, you are also getting rid of all sugars altogether. So in terms of how much glucose will be going into your blood, it's something that should be considered. Dr. Attia also mentions that insulin spikes caused by eating carbohydrates is actually smaller in the morning than it is in the evening, so that could be something that you may consider, especially if you're trying to get more calories in, because carbs are quite calorie heavy. In terms of how many calories that you actually need, again, it's actually on a person-to-person basis. So for example, if you're a runner, a lot of those people may have like upwards of 400 grams of carbs a day, which is a lot of carbs, or maybe 500 grams even on that very high end, very, very high end. Whereas, for example, if you're not working off those carbs, if you're not working off that glucose that's in your blood, if you're not working out while you're having that, if you're someone who's just sedentary, you will end up more overweight because you do not use those carbs and you do not use that glucose. That glucose is going nowhere. It's just going to start pooling into your subcutaneous fat. That's just how it works. So if you're someone who works out a lot, maybe you might need more carbs. Whereas if you're someone who has a more sedentary lifestyle, like this guy, for example, then it might be good for you to look at 225 or even down to 100 grams of carbs. Again, it's on you to listen to your body and to do research on yourself. Protein. There is no benefit to reducing protein, at least there's no observed benefit. The government guidelines state that a human needs 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram per day, but people get this misconstrued for it being optimal. It's really, really not. So what you're going to really want to look for is 1.6 grams per kilogram per day. This is because it's been shown, actually especially in older males, that when they were consuming 0.8 grams per kilogram per day, their muscle mass actually decreased. So this building block nutrient, protein, when only taken at 0.8 grams, actually caused less muscle than when it was consumed. So that is why we're going to be looking for around 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram. What I will say is not all proteins are made the same. You see a lot of people who are vegans might have chickpeas, and a lot of people who aren't vegans might have steak. And when you look at both of them, they might have a similar amount of protein in each. But the difference is amino acids. Amino acids are the things that actually help break down the protein and help it actually go into the places where it needs to go. So that is extremely vital for your protein intake. You could eat like 40 grams of protein, but if you don't have any amino acids, you really aren't going to be getting the most out of it that you can. In addition to this, on the side note, if you're a vegan watching this, I obviously haven't mentioned supplements just yet, but you'll probably need a amino acid supplement and make it a full spectrum one. Don't just make it a BCAA one, and get a B12 supplement as well, because these are the things that you're going to miss out the most on when you go into a vegan diet. The B12 is going to help with creating new red blood cells. It's going to help with energy of the muscles. You're really going to notice a difference if you don't get enough B12 in you. So that's something that I would mention. Next one is fats. Fat almost lies in between carbs and proteins, in the fact that it is both an energy source like carbohydrate and a building block nutrient like protein. Fats are important as a long-term source of fuel, as well as being highly beneficial for heart, brain and metabolism health when we're talking about omega-3s and omega-6s. Cholesterol itself often gets a bad rap, but it's actually an important component in a vast majority of the body's processes. Although high amounts of LDL cholesterol is where it gets its bad name from, as we mentioned earlier. So what we need to do is we need to get rid of all these LDL foods that will increase your LDL levels. So we've got stuff like palm oil, really bad vegetable oil, seed oils. They're going to be really, really bad for you. Stuff like junk food. This actually looks lovely. I'm actually starving at the minute. I'm not going to have it though. And like spreadable butter. Oh god, bro, get that out. Get that. If you have spreadable butter in the fridge right now, you need to throw it away. Like, I'm being serious. You need to throw it away. It's really bad. You don't want to be having that. What we want to be looking for is, as I mentioned earlier, grass-fed butters. If you want a snack, go for some macadamias or something. Avocados really good for monounsaturated fats, and salmon, polyunsaturated, monounsaturated fats in salmon as well. Things that are really good for you. Studies on the different fats and how they impact the body is limited at the moment, to be quite honest. But in general, it is agreed upon by the scientific community to decrease the saturated fats, increase the monounsaturated fats, and increase the polyunsaturated fats, and have anywhere from 20 to 35% of your overall calories being from fats. I know that sounds like a lot, but fats are quite calorific. They're quite high in calories naturally. This is also why a lot of people say you don't want to eat fats or you'll get fat, which is, to say the least, quite a naive claim. But I do understand where they're coming from, because it has a lot of calories. If you have too many calories, you will get subcutaneous fat. So you're going to have to look at how many fats you're getting, what that means for you, how many calories you're looking to get, and how that can fit into your own diet. But as long as you're keeping them whole, unprocessed, and good fats, you should be okay. Time-sensitive fasting. If you're somebody who's into health, this is probably something that you've heard a lot over the past few years. It's been a popular trend online. It's certainly got a lot of buzz around it. Time-sensitive fasting is when you allocate a block of time to eat, and then you allocate a block of time to fast, not eat. So how it would usually work is it would be maybe from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. That would be 8 hours of eating, and then 16 hours of fasting, 16 hours of not eating. So, the reasons why this is so good for many people is because doing this part as well, doing these blue parts where you're not eating, one, you will start to burn fat instead of burning sugar because you have no insulin spike. Two, you will be able to digest your food better because it will be able to instead of just having more food on top of more food on top of more food, your body can have a little bit of a rest and just start to digest what it already has. And 3, especially for those people who are overnourished and typically tend to overeat, putting a frame of when you will eat is better for reducing your calories. Because imagine how it is for someone who eats all the time. For example, it gets to 6 p.m. And then you're having snack after snack, and then you have a takeaway at 8 p.m. and then a snack and a snack, and then you eat, and then you sleep at 10. That's what it's like for a lot of people. So this gives you a time frame in order to know when you should be eating and when you shouldn't be eating, which will help you reduce your calories if you are overnourished, that is. Dr. Attia even mentions going down to 2 hours of eating and 22 hours of fasting. But he does mention that this is only an extreme that should be done in very short periods of time, mainly for people who are overnourished and overweight anyway, and quite heavily so, I would suggest. What I will say is this is really quite extreme. It's quite unreliable, and you're not going to be able to stick at it for a long time. So if you're someone who wants to take extreme action and wants a lot of short-term effects, then this is something that could really work well for you, but don't expect for you to do it for a long period of time, or at least not consistently for a long period of time. In addition to this, especially if you're a healthy person, this one will be a lot better for you than something like this. And I'm saying this because if you do a 2 hour to 22 hour fasting to eating ratio, if you're overnourished, if you're really big, if you're really overweight, you will lose a lot of fat, but you will also lose a lot of muscle, because when you eat protein, it signals to your body that you are full. You can't have a lot of protein all at once, as opposed to like sugars or different carbs or different kinds of fats. You could have a lot of them, but proteins, usually the calories that you have that are protein dense are the ones that fill you up. So if you're healthy, this won't work for you because you won't get the amount of protein that you need in. Whereas if you're someone who's really overweight, you will lose muscle, but you will also lose a lot more fat. So the ratio there works a lot better. Whereas if you were to do this and you were healthy, you would just be losing muscle. You wouldn't really lose as much fat as you would muscle. To recap this section, if you're someone who is healthy and you just want to make sure you're digesting your food well, and you just want to make sure you're not having any insulin spikes, and you want to start really burning through that fat, then this is something that could really work well for you. Make sure, again, that you're keeping it accessible for yourself so that you can actually continue doing it. But 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. will be really good. And this one here is really for those people who are really overweight and really need to make a change soon. Those people who really want to make a difference in their life and to really push back against those things and these diseases that we're talking about. Sleep. You've just had an 18-hour shift. You don't have time in the morning to do anything, and you don't have any time in the evening either, because you have to make dinner and that new show is out, and this is your alone time. I know what I'll do, you say. I know what I'll do. I'll just sleep half an hour later, which turns into an hour, which turns into 2 hours. And finally, you're in bed. This is the case for so many people. Everyone has. I have, and I'm sure you have as well. And do you remember how you felt the morning after? You feel pretty bad. Whether or not you're hungover, whether or not you're just sleep deprived, either way, you do not feel good. It is not a good feeling. But one question I want to ask is, why do so many of us neglect our sleeping? Why do so many of us think it is not valuable or a waste of time? There's one question that I want you to think about, and I genuinely want you to think about this, bro. Like, genuinely think about it. Which animals don't sleep? You would think that the most vicious predators and the most evasive of preys would have all have gotten rid of their sleep by now through evolution. This is a state that is extremely vulnerable. But no animals don't sleep. All animals sleep. Fair enough, certain animals are different to others in the way that they sleep. Maybe they sleep more, maybe they sleep less. You have animals like horses that sleep straight up. You have animals like dolphins who one side of their brain goes to sleep and the other stays awake, and then one side goes to sleep and the other stays awake. So many different ways. You have frogs, for example, who only intermittently sleep. Even fruit flies who only last like a week, they still sleep. It might be for like 10 seconds, but they still sleep. All animals have a resting state. Now, why do they all have a resting state? What is so important about sleep? Dr. Attia tells a personal story in the book about sleep. He studies the blood work of soldiers. You know, the big, masculine guys who look like they could beat me up and beat you up as well. No offense. These guys here who look so fit, they look like they are just in peak condition. When he checked the blood work of these guys, he instantly saw that something was seriously wrong. They had old man blood, as he said. They had all the telltale signs of insulin resistance. They had all the telltale signs of high blood pressure. And their sex hormones even were way off, as well as the rest of their hormones as well. This was simply because, well, they didn't have enough consistent sleep and they weren't getting enough sleep regardless. Because both things are important. You can get 8 hours sleep, but if you're getting 8 hours sleep and you're going to bed at 10, and then you're getting 8 hours sleep and you're going to bed in the middle of the day, those are going to be completely different and they're not even going to be as valuable as one another. It's clear that this lack of sleep was really taking a toll on their health. And what's even more interesting is that in terms of the Four Horsemen, the only one that isn't proven to be affected by sleep is cancer. All of the rest of them are connected to sleep, and especially sleep quality. So, to first improve our sleeping health, let's first go through the stages of sleep. REM sleep, otherwise known as rapid eye movement sleep, is important for emotional health, as it helps remove emotion from memories and primes you for the day ahead. If this stage didn't take place, you would experience a heightened sense of anxiety, similar to those people with PTSD who have actually been shown to have disrupted REM sleep and they struggle to get into that stage of sleep. These people who have problems with REM sleep, it can often inhibit them from getting over traumatic events in the past. Think of REM sleep as the mental rejuvenation of the cycle. Good for memory, learning, improving your mood, and letting you reset for the day ahead, both emotionally and then physically in the next one, deep sleep. This is essentially a waste disposal system. During this part of your sleep cycle, you expel excess liquid and junk from your brain, maintaining its effectiveness and keeping it healthy. This part is also the part that reduces the amyloid beta and the tau that I was talking about earlier in the Alzheimer's section. Attia also claims that short sleep, being below 6 hours of sleep a night, actually has been convincingly linked to Alzheimer's disease and your increased likelihood of getting it. What's more is it's even linked in all kinds of people, whether you are unhealthy or healthy. Sleep impairment and irregular circadian rhythm are both things that are also linked to Alzheimer's. These are things that disrupt your sleep. For example, the circadian rhythm is your body basically being able to tell you when you are sleepy and when you aren't sleepy in the morning. So here's a little graph. So for example, this would be when you're about to go to bed, when you start to feel sleepy. This would be during the night, you're asleep, so obviously you're going to have peak melatonin. And then here it should drop off as you get into the morning, and then probably cortisol usually spikes around here, which is actually a good thing in the morning, so you should want to keep that. As well as that, in this cycle as well, in the deep sleep is when the human growth hormones are released into the body, which is good for repairing your muscles, helping them build stronger. And as we actually get past the age of 60, this is when the human growth hormone starts to become inhibited. So a lot of the time, if someone's over 60, for example, or over 70 even, because it's not just over 60, you can still be healthy through 60 to 70. If you're one of these people, a lot of the time they can experience not really having their muscles repair and still aching in the morning. This is because that human growth hormone has been reduced. In conclusion, at all points in life, but especially when you are older, you should really try to make your sleep a priority, not just for your psychological health, but also for your physical health. In addition to this, light sleep, which is actually the stage that you're in the most, wasn't really mentioned by Dr. Attia that much. He only really mentions light sleep in a very, very fleeting part of the book, which he basically says that light sleep isn't really that good. You kind of want REM and you want deep sleep. I thought that I should do some research anyway, because I don't really want to just neglect this part because he doesn't talk about it. But from what I understand is light sleep kind of looks like a transitionary stage. REM sleep is a little bit lighter of a sleep, and deep sleep is a lot, well, deeper. While you do spend the majority of your time in this stage, it is widely accepted that the REM sleep and the deep sleep both have more established benefits and are both agreed by more scientists to be good for you. But that's not to say that light sleep doesn't have its own advantages. For example, light sleep is good for muscle relaxation and rejuvenation of the muscles as well as deep sleep. But it doesn't have so much benefit. Ideally, you should optimize to try and get in deep sleep and REM sleep a little bit more than light sleep. But the thing is usually it's going to look like this. It's usually in light. In the Apple app, it says core instead of light. But either way, these are okay. This is good. Sleeping better. I honestly don't believe, if you're someone who's following this video at all about health span, that you'd be the type of person to drink yourself into a coma at the end of the night. This is really stupid. Don't do this. So alcohol does make you feel drowsy and it may help you go to sleep faster, but you won't be getting the rest that you want. Essentially, as I mentioned earlier, you will be in this point. You will be in the light part of your sleep if you have alcohol. Not only that, but you will be waking up during the night and you will wake up just feeling groggy. You know, you never wake up after a night out and think, oh, I feel so rejuvenated. You're always just lumbering around the place. Don't eat anything 3 hours before bed. It's been shown to be good to go to sleep with a little bit of hunger. Obviously, don't go to bed really hungry. It's good to have a little bit of it. No stimulating technology. 2 hours before bed and 1 hour before bed, try to get rid of anything that is going to be stressful or worrisome for you, because this will put your brain in a state where it doesn't want to relax and it doesn't want to turn off, because it may believe at some point that it's under danger or it's under some kind of threat because of the cortisol and the stress that is produced in your brain. A hot bath or shower has also been shown to be really beneficial for going to sleep faster. This is because during the day, your bodily temperature will fluctuate, but in general, it goes on this kind of curve. One thing that is generally observed by most scientists during all of these processes is that when you go to sleep, your body will drop 1 Celsius, exactly 1 Celsius when you go to sleep. So we can organize our evening to get hot. So if you're in a hot bath, your body's going to say, I'm too hot, I'm going to cool down. Your core temperature will cool down. This will basically simulate what your body would be going through if you were falling asleep. That's why you find it so easy to fall asleep after a bath or after a shower. If you haven't given it a try, definitely give it a try. See if it works for you. A lot of people love this method. This is also the same for the next method. At the beginning of the day, your temperature starts to rise. So this is why people often say in the morning they take a cold bath or they take a cold shower, because if you're getting really cold, your body's saying, I need to heat up. So it's heating up your core temperature. Again, it's simulating the system that it usually goes through, but it's just taking it from more extremes. So you're going to wake up even faster if you have cold exposure. And just the last thing on sleep as well is, if you're in bed for 8 hours, you are not going to sleep for 8 hours. You're going to sleep for what likely is 7 hours or even 6 hours. You also have to take into account times that you wake up in the night. You also have to take into account waking up early in the morning. You also have to take into account just getting to bed and getting to sleep. It can take a long time, that's for sure. A lot of the time, if you do a tracker, which some people might do, it can often look like this. It's 8.5 hours in bed, 7 hours and 42 minutes asleep. This is actually a very favorable tracker. This is really good. I don't usually get stuff like this. This is good. Therefore, being in bed for 9 to 8 hours is actually best for getting that 8 hours sleep. Last but not least, it can be healthy to use these kind of sleep trackers, but don't focus on them too much. Obviously, you can use them, they bring really good sources of statistics. So, you can have a look at your own sleep. You can start to weigh up things that you're doing kind of before bed and see which ones are impacting your sleep. But ultimately, make sure to do assessments on your own body, because the assessments that you can do on yourself will be a lot more accurate than something like this. And also, it can be unhealthy to just look at how you can improve your sleep score, and then you can just keep on obsessing over that, and that's not very healthy. So even if it is good statistics that it is giving you, sometimes it might be good to just kind of go on a purge from it. So kind of stop for a week, stop for 2 weeks, just so you can actually kind of feel what it feels like to actually assess your own sleep instead of just going off what this says. Supplements, and now what I will say about supplements is it should be treated as just that. If you skip the whole video and you're just on this bit now, these supplements won't really help you as much as you might want them to. They're not going to fix everything for you. They're not a one size fits all, and they're not just going to magically make you really healthy. These things are things that will be able to help you do these actions, and they're also things that in general humans should have, because maybe we can't naturally produce it, or maybe it's hard for us to find in foods and stuff like that. So what Dr. Attia says is vitamin D, especially in the winter. We're getting into the winter now as I'm recording this, so I'm taking more and more as I can, around 3,000 to 5,000 IUs. Fish oil, soft gels, B6 3 times a week. In my opinion, it's a bit excessive to just be doing it like 3 times a week. So I would say maybe do it every other day or every second day, if that makes sense. Or, it's up to you. A glucose control probiotic, which can be a little more expensive if it's specifically for glucose, but either way, if you just get like a probiotic, it'll still do wonders for you regardless. Protein powders. Obviously, it depends on which ones you want. If you're vegan, like a pea protein or even a faba bean protein might be good. I quite like whey proteins. I know some people don't like it, but for me personally, it works quite well. A magnesium supplement. Magnesium's super important in the body. A vital part in so many different processes that we go through. Methylated B12, and methylation just means that it's gone through kind of the first stage of digestion in the body, so it's easier for you to intake it and easier for you to absorb it. Green powders, just a fantastic all-around supplement that has a whole bunch of different things that you might not get in your diet sometimes, such as, if you don't like broccoli, for example, have some of that in. Or if you want some chlorophyll or something, then they might have that in. So it's just a really good all-arounder. Curcumin, been shown to be really good for brain health, but it's usually used for joint health. So it's really good for kind of the things that Dr. Attia talks about in terms of being active and in terms of being stable. So that's really good for that. Ashwagandha as well, as he mentions, actually about sleep and reducing stress. Should be cycled on and off for weeks at a time. Dr. Attia actually doesn't say that in the book, but I'm going to tell you that now, because sometimes ashwagandha and stuff of the like can be too powerful to the point where it can actually alter you as a person. Most of the time it's not a long-term thing, but sometimes it can affect your long-term consumption of these things. For example, if I take really, really strong ashwagandha for 2 weeks, it might get to a point where I start to feel like mentally numb. In addition to that, it might ruin my further takings of ashwagandha. So kind of have some caution with this, although I do think it's a really good thing. Emotional health. Dr. Attia in the book talks about his own traumas, faults and mistakes. Why should we live longer? He puts forward to us. And it's a generally good question, like why do you want to live longer? Why have you watched this whole video up until this point? What is it that's important to you about this subject? And it's important to keep that in the forefront of your mind as well. For me personally, I want to be there for kind of my kids when I'm like 70 or 80. I just came back from London with my nana who's 88, and she just walks around London like it's nothing. She walks upstairs, she looks up at things. Obviously her body isn't that of a young person anymore, but she doesn't act like someone who is 88 or someone who is old. She has fortified her body in a way that she's able to walk like that, and she's able to do these things that I find honestly quite astonishing for someone her age. You might have different goals than me. You might just fear death more, and you might just want to live longer. That's fine as well. Or you might be someone who is really excited about the progression of a certain technology, and you really want to see it for an extra 10 or 20 years. I think that's fair enough as well, but it's good to keep it in the front of your mind there. It's always important as well to learn about oneself, whether that's through like meditation, or whether that's through reading a book that really speaks to you, or whether that's through doing more intensive work, such as, some people like to go to therapy, or some people like to go to some sort of counselling. It could be through working through traumas that you have in life, or talking to someone about it, of course. But I think ultimately some people might need to mend their mental health before they mend any kind of physical health. Not only does that help you see all of the good things that come from a good physical health, but it also helps you be consistent for longer as well. I think naturally both of them go hand in hand. This could be honestly the most important chapter of this whole thing, even though it's the only one that isn't actually on physical health, even though this is all on physical health. It's just that interconnected with it. I also think, to be honest, that in terms of practices that are really good for your mental health, I've probably named a lot of them anyway. Things like exercising, things like socializing, things like getting a sport for yourself and stuff like that. A lot of people really, really, really benefit from that in their mental health as well. So with that, it's the conclusion to the guide. Thank you. It's taken me quite a while to make this, I will say that. It's taken me quite a while, but I've enjoyed it and I've learned a lot as well. And I'm hoping to really kickstart this channel off once I'm done with this. So thank you very much. Subscribe if you like it. Yeah. Love you.